The little boy's voice cut through the air like a bell in a cathedral. He tugged at his mother's coat, his eyes wide with recognition, not fear, not confusion, just something deep and certain. He pointed across the crowded grocery aisle and said, "Mom, that's him, that's the man who saved me." And just like that, her smile dropped, her body froze, her hands trembled. Because the man, her son, just pointed to the one calmly placing milk into his cart, was supposed to be dead, and if not dead, then definitely gone forever. She hadn't seen that face in 9 years, not since the trial, not since she lied. It should have been an ordinary afternoon. The hum of fluorescent lights, the low rumble of shopping carts, the familiar jingle of automated checkout lines echoing down the tiled floor. Mothers were comparing prices, elderly men were inspecting tomatoes, kids begged for cereal with cartoon faces, and in aisle 7, Evelyn Hart pushed her cart slowly, one hand resting on the handle, the other clutching a small grocery list, scribbled in blue ink. Her son, Liam, 7 years old and full of questions, beside her, swinging a plastic toy airplane and humming to himself. "Mom, can we get the cereal with the spaceship on it?" he asked, already reaching for the box. She smiled. "Only if it doesn't have those sugar bombs you like." But then, everything changed in a second. Liam stopped walking, just froze, his arm lowered. His toy plane hung limp in his hand. Then slowly, his small finger lifted and pointed. Evelyn followed his gaze, expecting to see a classmate, maybe a cartoon character on a box, but instead, she saw a man, mid-30s, tall, light beard, baseball cap pulled low. He wore a faded gray jacket and jeans, pushing a cart with eggs, milk, peanut butter. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening, but Liam whispered, in that calm, breathless way children do when they see something sacred, "Mom, that's him, that's the man who saved me." Her breath caught in her throat. "What?" she whispered back, confused. "That's him," Liam said louder now, tugging her sleeve. "That's the man from the river." Evelyn's world tilted. The color drained from her face. The smile that had rested so easily on her lips just moments before dissolved into something jagged and cold. Her eyes locked on the man, and her knees nearly buckled, because she knew that face, not just from her nightmares, but from a courtroom, from photographs, from the trial, from the lies. She had told the world he was dangerous, unstable. She had helped send him away, but now he stood in front of her live, quiet, unsuspecting, and her son. The same son she never told the full story to. The boy who barely survived that day by the river was looking at that man like he was a guardian angel. Evelyn felt her heart slam against her ribs. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, and the man, he turned, slowly, maybe sensing her stare. His eyes lifted beneath the cap, blue, sharp, tired, and, in that instant, he saw her. Recognition flickered like a spark in his face, but he didn't smile, didn't wave, he just froze. Both of them did. Two ghosts in a grocery store, staring across a canyon of years and broken truths. Liam, oblivious to the storm he'd just stirred, tugged her sleeve again. "Mom, he's right there. Can I go say thank you?" "No," she said, too quickly, her voice cracked. "No, stay here." "But please," she whispered, kneeling down, gripping his shoulders. Her fingers were ice. You must be mistaken, sweetheart." Liam frowned. "But I'm not. That's him, from the river, I remember." The man hadn't moved. He stood still, clutching the handle of his cart like it anchored him to the ground. His jaw clenched, his eyes didn't blink, but they stayed locked on hers. Evelyn swallowed. Every nerve in her body screamed. She stood, turned the cart around. "We have to go." But we didn't finish. Now, she walked fast, almost ran, pushed the cart toward the exit like the store was on fire. Behind her, she could still feel his stare, like a weight pressing between her shoulder blades, but she didn't turn around, not until they were outside, past the automatic doors, into the blinding light of day. She didn't stop until they reached the car, where she fumbled with the keys. Like her hands were made of glass. Liam watched her, puzzled. "Why are you scared?" She looked down at him, trembling. "I'm not," she whispered. I wasn't ready." "Ready for what?" But she didn't answer, because the truth was something she buried 9 years ago, deep, beneath courtroom testimonies and whispered warnings. Something she hoped would never claw its way back to the surface. And yet, her son remembered him, and he remembered saving her son, which meant everything she thought was buried WASN, single quotes T. And everything she told herself she believed wasn't true. Not anymore. Not after today. The wind was louder that day than she remembered, sharp, like a whisper through cracked glass. The kind of breeze that makes every tree lean just a little, as though the whole forest is trying to listen to something too quiet to hear. Evelyn had taken Liam to the park by the river. He was only a baby then, just turned to wobbly on his feet, curious about everything. He loved to run toward things, to point at butterflies and chase squirrels he could never catch. That day, the grass was damp with early spring rain, and the river had swelled, rushing louder than usual. She remembered warning signs near the edge, half faded from weather and time, but Liam didn't notice. He toddled toward the edge like he was drawn to it. She had looked away. just for a second, a text message, maybe, or a glance at a dog barking nearby. That's the part she still can't forgive herself for. The second she turned her head, when she turned back, he was gone. There was no scream, no splash, just absence. The grass was empty, the stroller untouched. Her heart dropped through her ribs like a stone. "Liam," she screamed. Panic detonated. Inside her, she ran to the riverbank. Looked left, right, nothing. Then dash. Movement. A figure sprinting down the slope near the rocks. A man, early 20s, tall, lean, shirt soaked from the river spray. She'd never seen him before. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions. He just dove straight into the current. The water was fierce, brown and fast, with whirlpools near the far bend. No one else moved. No one else reacted. Just him. Seconds passed like hours. Then, like a miracle, he surfaced, arms locked around a tiny, coughing, gasping child. Her child. He dragged himself to the shore, chest heaving, arms trembling from the weight, eyes red from the river. But he didn't hesitate. He placed Liam gently on the ground and patted his back, urging the water out of his lungs. Evelyn fell to her knees, sobbing, grabbing Liam and holding him like she would never let go. "Is he breathing?" she cried. The man nodded. "He's okay, thank you," she whispered, over and over again. "Oh my God, thank you." That should have been the end. But it wasn't, because someone nearby had called 911, and when the paramedics arrived, the police did too. They asked questions, took statements. Someone whispered something about the man being off, that he'd been seen talking to himself near the water earlier, that he was always hanging around the park. A neighbor called him unstable. Another said he was obsessed with children. And Evelyn, still shaken, still soaked, still terrified, nodded when they asked if she knew him. "No," she said, "I've never seen him before," which was the truth. But then they asked, "Did he take your child into the river?" She hesitated. And in that hesitation, everything collapsed. She wanted to say no, to tell them he saved her son, but fear got in the way. The fear that maybe it wasn't just an accident, that maybe she hadn't seen the whole thing, that maybe he was dangerous. So she nodded, just slightly, and that was enough. They arrested him. The man didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just looked at her, wet, shaking, confused, and said, "I was just trying to help." And that look stayed with her, even after the handcuffs, even after the trial, even after they labeled him mentally unfit and a danger to the community, even after they shipped him off to a facility 2 counties away, never to be seen again. The news called it a tragedy, a misunderstanding, but Evelyn knew better, because the man who saved her son didn't just disappear. She helped erase him with one word, with one silence, and now, 9 years later, in the frozen food aisle of a grocery store, he had returned, and her son, the boy who barely remembered anything before kindergarten, looked at that man with eyes full of gratitude, not fear, because he remembered the truth. Even if she'd tried so hard to forget it, told from the man's point of view. 9 years ago, the water was louder than usual. It always was after a storm. The current turned mean, wild, like a snake with no leash. But that day, he didn't care. He wasn't afraid of the river. It made sense to him in ways people didn't. He stood on the hill above the bend, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the leaves swirl and catch in eddies, listening. The voices in his head weren't real. Not anymore. He'd done the work, taken the meds, showed up to therapy, tried to be invisible in a world that never forgave strange men who talked to themselves or flinched when touched. The world wanted normal. He gave them silence instead. But something that morning had told him to go to the park. He didn't argue with the feeling. Sometimes the pull toward a place was enough. Sometimes it meant something. He didn't expect the child, not until he saw him, tiny legs wobbling too close to the muddy edge, chasing a floating stick like it was treasure. The river was fast, too fast for any child. The mother wasn't watching. He didn't judge. People blink, it happens. But when the boy fell, when that small body disappeared under the edge, without a sound, his own legs moved before his brain could catch up. He tore down the slope, slipped on wet grass, landed hard on his knees, and dove without thinking. Current was angry. It snatched at him like fingers in the dark, pulling him deeper, dragging him toward the bend where the rocks waited. But he kicked, fought, opened his eyes against the sting and blur of silt and panic. That there, a flash of red fabric, a little hand. He reached out, grabbed the child, pulled him up. The boy coughed, sputtered, clung to his neck like a lifeline. Together, they surfaced, gasping. When he got them to the shore, he collapsed beside the boy. Exhausted, he pressed gently on the small chest, coaxing the water out, then finally breathing. Wet sobs, warmth. The mother came running. Tears, gratitude, shaking hands. He didn't want a medal, didn't want a name, just wanted to see the boy breathe again. But then, uniforms arrived. Questions, radios, confusion. He didn't fight when they grabbed his wrists, didn't speak when they twisted his arms behind his back. Somewhere in the chaos, the mother's eyes changed. The gratitude vanished, replaced by fear, or guilt, or something he couldn't name. The last thing he saw, before they shoved him in the back of the cruiser, was the boy. Tiny. Wrapped in a towel, looking at him through the glass. With a frown of confusion, like he couldn't understand why his rescuer was being taken away, neither could he. He was processed like a criminal. Photographed, fingerprinted. They asked if he had a record. He didn't. Asked if he had any mental history. He told the truth. That was his mistake. Because once he said those words, history of depression, talk therapy, schizotypal diagnosis, the world closed its ears. No one cared that he'd passed his evaluations. No one cared that he saved a life. They only cared about the label. But he became a warning, not a man, not a hero. He was sentenced to mandatory psychiatric care and confined to a facility with 2 bright lights and 2 quiet halls. They said it was for his own good, but he knew what it was. Punishment for not fitting in. Years passed. He was released early quietly after, showing stability, cooperation, peace, but by then, he'd lost everything. His job, his apartment, his name. So he moved to towns over, started working odd shifts, night restocks, dishwasher gigs, places where no one asked questions. He didn't talk to people, didn't tell his story, didn't expect to ever see that boy again, until that day, in aisle 7. A little hand pointed up at him, and a small voice said, "That's the man who saved me." And for the first time in 9 years, someone finally said it out loud. But then he saw her, the mother. The one who changed everything with a single nod, and just like that, the old silence returned. Because even after all these years, she still looked like she didn't know whether he was a miracle or a mistake. The courtroom had smelled like old wood and fear. Sunlight came through the windows in stripes, cutting the silence into narrow beams. The gallery was half full. Curious neighbors, local press, teachers, nurses, people who thought they knew who was good and who was not. Evelyn sat on the front bench, holding her son's hand, though he was too young to understand what was happening. Liam played with the cuff of her blouse, tugging on the threadbare seam, while lawyers argued over events he barely remembered. The prosecutor called it an abduction. "Your Honor," she said, "the facts are simple. A man with a history of psychiatric disturbance approached a toddler, unsupervised, near a body of water. Whether or not he intended harm is irrelevant. The risk was real. The mother was terrified, and the child's life was endangered." Evelyn said nothing. At first, she had been instructed to keep her answers short, precise, and clean, to stick to what she felt and not what she doubted. Doubt makes people uncomfortable. Doubt is messy. So she did what scared mothers do in courtrooms shaped like confessionals. She cried, and the jury listened. She told them the truth, least part of it, that she'd looked away, that she'd panicked, that the man came from nowhere and dove into the river. But then came the prosecutor's question, "And when he brought your son back, did he try to leave? Did he act nervous? Strange?" She paused. And in that pause, everything shifted, because the answer was no. He didn't try to run, he didn't act strange. He looked like someone who had just done the right thing. But Evelyn wasn't just on that witness stand as a mother. She was there as a woman trying to protect a reputation, a job, a child, a sense of safety she'd already lost once. So she said, I didn't know what he wanted." A single sentence, spoken softly, truth adjacent, and just enough to allow everyone in the room to believe what they already suspected, that strange men who dive into rivers for children are not heroes. They're threats in disguise. The defense lawyer pushed back. Presented medical records. Said the man had no history of violence. Showed the court the bloodied clothes from the river. But it wasn't enough, because once fear opens the door, truth takes the back seat. He was found mentally unstable with potential for risk. Not guilty of a crime, but also not safe enough to walk free. He was committed under public welfare, Clause 7b, which meant he'd disappear quietly, without trial, without sentencing, without a chance to ever speak for himself again. The headline said, "Good Samaritan or Guardian Gone Wrong. Mother's instinct saves child twice, once from river. Once from stranger community rallies around single mom after scare." No one mentioned his name. No one asked what he saw in the water that day. No one cared that Evelyn never said he kidnapped her son, just that she hadn't said he didn't, and that silence became law. Afterward, people treated her like a survivor, brought her casseroles, gave her sideways hugs in church, told her she was brave for doing what needed to be done. No one asked her if she slept at night. No one saw the guilt unraveling her from the inside. The judge had said, "Sometimes, we must err on the side of caution," and Evelyn had nodded like she agreed. But years later, when she lay awake staring at the ceiling, she would remember how the man looked at her from across that courtroom. Not angry, not betrayed, just confused, like he still didn't understand how saving a child turned him into a ghost. He never liked the word patient. It made him feel temporary, like he was just waiting to be someone else again. But that's what they called him. Patient number 114B. For 16 months, his room at the facility had one window, barred, a bed, a chair, a drawer without knobs. The air always smelled like bleach. And breakfast, like the place couldn't decide if it wanted to be clean or kind. He spoke only when spoken to. He took the meds. He read books with dog-eared corners and no covers, and every day, someone new walked by his room and said the same thing. You're not a bad man. You just need help. He wanted to believe them. But when people say that, what they really mean is, you scare us. And fear, he'd learned, speaks louder than truth. He was released on a Thursday, quietly, no press, no paperwork in the local paper. Just a bus ride, a brown paper bag with his belongings, and a laminated discharge form that read, nonviolent, cooperative, reintegrated. The world outside had changed. He didn't have a home to return to. His apartment was long gone. His job at the hardware store had been filled. His phone plan had expired. His voicemail was just a dial tone now. So he walked town to town, job to job, night shifts at gas stations, back doors at diners, stockroom work where eye contact wasn't required. He shaved when he could, ate when someone let him, slept with one shoe on, just in case, and he stopped introducing himself, because his name didn't mean anything anymore. He never told people what happened. How could he? Who would believe that the worst thing he'd ever done was save a child? He lived like that for 7 years, invisible, safe, alone, every so often. He'd see a boy running in a park or hear the splash of a river behind a tree line and he'd feel something ripple in his chest. Not sadness, not regret, just distance. Like watching your own life through a foggy window. And then one day, he saw a help wanted sign. It was taped to the window of a corner grocery store in a town too small for news vans and too quiet for gossip. The job was basic: freezer stocking, trash duty, inventory. The kind of work that didn't require a resume, just a pulse and steady hands. He said yes. He showed up early, left late, never missed a shift. And over time, the manager forgot to ask for his ID. The other workers learned to nod instead of speak. And he learned to be grateful for silence again. Until that day, I'll 7 a box of cereal in his hand, and a little boy's voice behind him saying, "That's the man who saved me." The words hit like a match against dry wood. He didn't turn right away, didn't breathe, didn't hope. But when he did, when he turned and saw the child's face, and then the mother's, his legs went cold. Not from fear, not from guilt, but from something older, like grief, because the boy had grown. He had eyes full of curiosity and wonder and memory. And he remembered, not the water, not the panic, but him and Evelyn. Evelyn still looked like the woman from the courtroom, frozen between gratitude and shame, caught in a decision she made years ago and never stopped living in. He didn't blame her, not really. He just wished she had said something, anything. Instead, she turned and pushed the cart away, like the aisle had caught fire, and he stood there, holding milk, listening to the echo of the boy's voice replay over and over again in his mind. That's the man who saved me, and for the first time in nearly a decade, someone saw him, not as a patient, not as a danger, not as a vile number or a mistake, or a warning, but as what he had always been, a man who did the right thing, and paid for it with everything. Liam couldn't sleep that night. The image of the man in aisle 7 stuck to his mind like a sticker he couldn't peel off. Not because he looked familiar, but because he felt familiar. The way the man stood, the way his eyes softened when their gazes met, it was like something deep in Liam's memory had woken up. He sat on the edge of his bed, swinging his legs, while the hallway light spilled under his door. Downstairs, his mom was quiet. She hadn't spoken much since they left the store. Dinner had been rushed. The dishes still sat in the sink. She'd barely touched her food. Liam stared at the ceiling, then slowly climbed down and tiptoed to the living room. Mom, Evelyn, sat curled on the couch, a blanket around her shoulders, eyes locked on nothing. She startled when she heard him. "Liam, you should be sleeping." "I can't." He sat beside her, knees pulled up. "Mom, I know that man." She closed her eyes. "No, honey, you just think you do." "I don't think, I remember. From the river, I was little, but I remember." Evelyn looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you remember?" Liam frowned, trying to put pieces together. "It was cold and I was scared. And then, arms. Strong arms, they grabbed me. I remember feeling safe." She said nothing, and when I saw him in the store, I felt the same thing. She turned away, tears threatening her voice. "Liam, you were only 2. You couldn't remember something like that." But he did, not clearly, not in detail, but in feelings, and sometimes feelings speak louder than facts. "Why didn't you want me to talk to him?" Evelyn's fingers tightened around the blanket. "Because sometimes people aren't who we remember." "That's not true," Liam said softly. "I remember being safe." She looked at her son, his face so innocent, yet carved with something deeper, something heavy for someone his age. And she cracked. "I lied," she whispered. Liam blinked. "About what?" She took a shaky breath. "About him. I told the court he might have been dangerous. I said I didn't know what his intentions were, but the truth is, he saved you. He saved your life." Liam's brow furrowed. "Then why?" "Because I was scared." she said, and scared people make bad decisions. I didn't understand him. I didn't know who he was or where he came from, and everyone kept asking if I felt unsafe. And her voice broke. I just wanted it to be over. I just wanted you to be safe. So I nodded, and that was enough to ruin his life. The room was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the soft ticking of the wall clock. You said he was dangerous, Liam whispered. I know, but he's not. No, she said. He's not. Then we have to tell someone. Evelyn shook her head. It's not that simple. Why not? Because people don't like to admit they were wrong, especially not the ones in power. Liam stood up, small hands clenched. But I'm not scared of being wrong. I just want to be right now. And with that, he marched upstairs. Evelyn sat frozen, her heart in pieces. That night, Liam opened her laptop. He didn't know where to start, but he typed what he remembered. Man saves boy from river, wrongly accused. He didn't find much. The town newspaper had a paywall, but buried on page 4 of an old online archive, he found something, a photo of a young man in handcuffs, soaked to the skin, led into a courtroom. The headline read, "Man taken into custody after river incident involving toddler," and in the comment section, just one response stated, "Years ago," with no replies. It said, "That man saved that boy. I saw it happen." The rest of them just needed someone to blame. Liam stared at the screen. He didn't know who wrote it, but for the first time, he realized something that felt more real than anything he'd ever learned in school. Sometimes, the truth survives in whispers, and maybe, just maybe, he could make it louder the next morning. Evelyn was greeted by silence and, then something stranger, at the local cafe, where she picked up her usual black coffee and Liam's favorite, muffin. The woman behind the counter didn't smile like she usually did. Just a brief glance, a flicker of recognition, then a hasty "That'll be for 75. At the gas station, the man who always offered to pump her gas didn't wave, just stared at the concrete as she drove off. She thought maybe she was imagining it. And that afternoon, when she picked Liam up from school, the principal was waiting at the gate. "Mrs. Hart," he said politely, "can we speak?" They stepped aside, just behind the oak tree near the fence. "There's been chatter," he said, "about the grocery store. About something your son said." Evelyn's throat went dry. "He hasn't done anything wrong," the principal added quickly. "In fact, he's been unusually thoughtful. But several students said he told them that the man in the newspaper, the one from years ago, was actually a hero." She nodded slowly. "He's not wrong," she whispered. The principal tilted his head. "Well, that complicates things. Because the town hadn't forgotten. They'd just chosen to bury it. In small towns, truth isn't erased, it's quietly folded and put in the drawer with the other uncomfortable things. Like the woman who left her husband in the night. Like the boy who cried wolf about his uncle. Like the man who saved a child and got locked away. But now, that drawer was cracked open, and people were peeking inside. That evening, Evelyn got a phone call. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something in her gut said she should. "Hello." A voice, female, mid-50s. "You don't know me, but I was at the park that day." The voice said, "When your son fell in, I saw it all." Evelyn froze. "I didn't speak up then. I should have. I was scared." The police were already writing the story before anyone had time to ask what really happened. Silence. "I just wanted you to know. You weren't crazy. That man saved your son. I'm sorry for not saying something sooner." Evelyn blinked hard. "Thank you," she whispered, but the woman wasn't done. "Be careful," she said. "Some people don't like old stories being rewritten." Click, the line went dead. That night, Evelyn went through her old boxers. The ones she told herself she'd thrown away, but had kept buried in the back of her closet. Court transcripts, news, clippings. The photograph from the trial, his eyes looking straight into the camera, as if he knew it wouldn't matter what he said. She held the photo in her hand and wept. Because she had built a life on a foundation made of silence, and now her son was trying to plant flowers there. Across town, Liam wasn't silent either. He had printed the article from the old online archive. Taped it to his backpack. Told to friends at school, then a teacher overheard, pulled him aside. Asked questions. Liam didn't lie. "My mom said he saved me, but no one listened." "That's not fair." The teacher paused, then whispered, "You're right." By Friday, 3 more people were talking. By Sunday, the pastor mentioned something in his sermon about redemption, and seeing people the way God does, not the way rumor paints them. By Monday, someone slid an envelope under the grocery store door. No return address. Inside, a photo, black and white, a younger version of the man, working at the town hardware store, smiling, helping an old woman load a bag of mulch into her car. On the back, written in cursive, "He fixed my window when no one else would." He didn't know who sent it, but when he saw the photo, he felt his throat tighten. He hadn't seen himself smile like that in years. That night, the manager of the grocery store called him in. "You good?" he asked. The man nodded. "People been asking questions. I told him you were the best stock guy I ever had." A long pause. Then, "You want a raise?" The man blinked. Said nothing. just nodded. Because for the first time in 9 years, someone didn't ask what he did. They just wanted to keep him. It was a Thursday. Evelyn stood outside the grocery store for nearly 10 minutes before walking in. She stared at the glass doors like they were gates to a memory she wasn't ready to revisit. Every part of her wanted to leave, to pretend the moment in aisle 7 never happened, to keep lying quietly the way she'd trained herself to. But Liam had looked her in the eyes that morning, and said, "You can fix it, Mom, I believe you." So she walked inside. The hum of the refrigerators and the soft pop of the automatic doors felt louder than usual. She walked past the fruit section, past the freezer aisle, past the register where a teenager with chipped nail polish glanced up and gave a confused smile. Then she saw him. In the back corner, stocking shelves, his back turned. Calm, focused. He didn't hear her at first. She cleared her throat. He turned. Their eyes met for the first time in 9 years. They stood in front of each other, nothing between them but dust and breath and the weight of everything unsaid. She opened her mouth, then closed it. He waited. "I didn't think you'd still be here," she said softly. "I work Tuesdays through Saturdays," he replied, voice flat but not cold. "I came to talk." "You already said what you needed to." In court, his voice wasn't bitter, just tired, like someone who had carried the same weight too long to be angry anymore. "I know," she whispered, "but I never said what I needed to." "Not really." He looked down at the shelf, carefully placed a jar of peanut butter, then stood up. "I remember your son," he said, not his name, just his face, his arms around my neck. He was shaking. "I told him he'd be okay. You were the only reason he was." Silence. "I told them you were a stranger. That I didn't know your intentions, but I did. I saw it. In your face. The second you brought him out of that water, I knew." "Then why didn't you say that?" "Because they wanted a villain," she said. "And I let them pick you." The words hung between them like smoke. She continued. "You didn't deserve what happened, and I've lived with that guilt for almost a decade. It's eaten me alive." He looked at her then, and for the first time, something behind his eyes flickered recognition, not just of her, but of what she was carrying now. "Why now?" he asked. "Because my son remembered you," she said, voice cracking. "He remembered what you did. He looked at you like a hero, and I couldn't keep pretending you weren't." Another pause. The sound of a mop bucket squeaking in the distance. The hum of a security camera somewhere above. "I can't give you back what you lost," she said. "Your name, your job, your time. I know, but I want to start by telling the truth, publicly." He raised an eyebrow. "I've spoken to the school board," she said, "and the local paper. I'm going to write a statement. You don't have to be there. You don't even have to forgive me, but I'm going to say it. Every word." She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded envelope. "It's everything from that day. The police report, my notes, the news clips, and a letter from my son." She handed it to him. He didn't take it right away. Then slowly he did. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. "You don't have to say anything. Just know, I see you now." She turned to leave, but stopped. "I used to dream about that day," she said. "The river, you, him, and in my dreams. You always walked away, smiling." He looked at her. "Never smiled that day." "I know," she whispered, "and that's what breaks my heart the most." She left him there, envelope in hand, eyes unreadable. And for a long time after she was gone, he just stood still. But later that night, in a small apartment above a laundromat, under a flickering kitchen light, he opened the envelope. And inside, between the reports and the newsprint and the apology, was a drawing. Crayon, on paper. A little boy's handwriting that read, "Thank you for saving me. I remember your arms were warm. Love, Liam." And for the first time in 9 years, he smiled. The old church on Maple Street hadn't been this full in years. They weren't there for a wedding, not a funeral, just a woman who wanted to speak. Some came out of curiosity. Others came because the town had been buzzing for days about the boy, about the man in the grocery store, about something whispered back into the open. And some came because deep down, they knew that day by the river had never sat right, that the court's silence was too swift, that Evelyn Hart's testimony felt too clean. Evelyn stood at the front of the room, behind the pulpit usually reserved for sermons. Liam sat in the front row, legs swinging, his drawing tucked into his lap like armor. The man wasn't there, didn't need to be, because this wasn't about him anymore. This was about truth. About cleansing something rotted from the inside. Evelyn took a deep breath. The room quieted. "I lied," she said plainly, no throat-clearing. No excuses. Just the words. "I lied in a courtroom 9 years ago. I said I didn't know what the man who saved my son intended when he pulled him from the river. I let the police twist my words into fear. I let the community around me fill in the blanks with suspicion instead of gratitude." Murmurs rippled through the pews. "But I was there. I saw what he did. He didn't hesitate. He dove in, risking his life for a child he didn't know. And I let that man walk into a courtroom alone, because I was scared of what people would think of me if I defended someone labeled unstable." She paused. "I was wrong." Her voice wavered. She looked down, then back up. Some of you brought me casseroles, prayed for me, thanked me for protecting my child, but I didn't protect him. Batman did. She looked at Liam, and he remembered. The boy nodded softly. He remembered what I tried to forget. The warmth, the safety, the truth. She reached into her bag and held up a copy of the photo, the one from the trial, where the man stood dripping wet, handcuffed, confused. I want this picture to stop defining him, she said. I want his name back. Someone in the back cleared their throat, then stood. It was the old hardware store owner. He fixed my windows for years. The man said, never charged me extra, never asked for anything. He didn't deserve what we did to him. Someone else stood, a school librarian. I saw him read 2 kids once. On the bench outside the library, he never looked like a threat. We just never asked. One by one, people stood. Not many, but enough. Each one peeling back a layer of silence that had wrapped the town in guilt. Evelyn looked out at the crowd. Tears streaming now. I can't undo what I did. But I can speak. I can name it. And if there's one thing I hope comes from this, it's that we stop letting fear write our stories. The church was quiet again. Not with awkwardness, but with something heavier. Understanding. Liam walked up beside his mother. He held up his drawing, and in the shaky, pure voice only a child can summon, he said, he's my hero. And he still is. There were no applause. No standing ovation. Just the sound of people breathing a little deeper than they had in years. Outside, the sun had started to set, spilling gold through the stained glass windows. Evelyn stepped down from the pulpit, not lighter, not forgiven, but no longer silent. Later that week, the town newspaper published a front-page headline, Mother Breaks Silence. Truth Behind River Rescue. Finally revealed the article, named him, told his story, included Evelyn's public statement in full, and for once people listened. Some said, sorry, in awkward ways. Some baked pies. Some just nodded when he passed in the store. But most importantly, no one looked away anymore. The river looked different now, calmer, less wild, less angry. Like it, too, had grown tired of being misunderstood. He stood at the edge, hands in his pockets, the wind brushing past his face the way it always did, soft, not cruel. The same tree leaned slightly over the water, its trunk split with time. The same rocks lined the bend, some worn smoother now by seasons of silence. But the place didn't scare him anymore, because today, he hadn't come alone. Behind him, slow but steady, came 2 sets of footsteps. Lighter ones, quick and full of excitement. Smaller sneakers, crunching dried leaves, and heavier ones. Hesitant, quiet, careful. Evelyn and Liam. He didn't turn around, he didn't have to. Is this it? Liam asked, standing beside him. This is the place, he said. The boy looked at the water. He didn't remember much, not the sound, not the cold, but something in him still stirred. Not fear, not even curiosity, just peace. I want to thank you again, Liam said. The man nodded. You already did. I want to give you something, the boy added, pulling a folded sheet from his hoodie. I wrote it last night. He handed the man the paper. It was a drawing different from the first. This time, it was the river, but calm, and standing beside it 3 figures. A boy, a woman, and a man. Beneath it, in careful block letters. The river was scared too, but you made it. SAFE. The man stared at the picture for a long time, then folded it slowly, and tucked it into his jacket. Evelyn came forward. She hadn't spoken yet, not since they arrived. But now, she stepped close enough that he could see the way her eyes glistened. In the light, I don't expect forgiveness, she said, but if there's anything you ever need, any job, any letter, any way I can help rewrite the part I got so wrong, I will. He looked at her, and for the first time since that day truly looked. She wasn't the woman from the courtroom anymore. She was a mother who had finally stepped into the truth. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out something folded and yellowed with time. The original article. The one with the photo. He handed it to her. I don't need this anymore, he said. She unfolded it slowly, stared at the old image. The cuffs, the confusion. Then, gently, she walked to the river's edge, crouched down, and let the paper go. The wind caught it first, then the water. The past, drifting out of frame. No fire, no rage. Just release. Liam watched it float, then vanish around the bend. The man looked up at the sky. A single leaf twirled downward from the tree. Do you still hear them? Liam asked suddenly. The man blinked. Who? The voices. Mom said people used to think you were crazy. He gave a soft, unexpected smile. Sometimes, but not like before. I've learned to listen to the ones that matter. Liam nodded. Like mine, especially yours. Evelyn looked at them, both her son and the man who saved him. Who saved her too, in ways she didn't understand until now. Then the man stepped back, not away from them, just into himself. A quiet, whole space. Not a ghost, not a shadow, a man. He offered his hand to Liam, and the boy shook it, not like a child, like an equal. Then he turned to go. No ceremony, no big farewell, just a calm walk up the path. Liam called after him. Will we see you again? Man paused. looked back. I think so. And with that, he walked toward town, not away from the river, but toward a life he could finally claim. Behind him, Evelyn wiped a tear from her cheek. Liam held her hand, and the river, finally, was quiet.